Okay, well, it should be a fairly short video today. As we've been looking at cadences, we've been seeing our different zons resolving. And today we're just going to look at a particular combination of zons that tends to show up a lot in music. And it forms what we call a dominant seventh chord, resolving to a tonic chord. The Sol 7/5/3 resolving to Do 5/3. And it shows up a lot in music. It's very powerful. It immediately has a strong pull to resolve. Let's take a look at a little piece by Beethoven to kind of get a feel for how this works. So this is the opening to Beethoven Symphony No. 1 in C major. And you can see Beethoven cycles through several different keys at the beginning. You can see that B flat in the first measure indicates he's in F major. Then we go to B natural, we're in C major. F sharp pulls us into G major. There's the F natural returns, pulls us back into C major after the opening. And what really makes that key stick is each time above the Sol Do in the bass, or Sol La, there's a deceptive motion in C major. Sol Do, Sol, presumably it would resolve to Do if we were to continue the example. But above the Sol each time there is a major triad. You see the C to the E on that downbeat is a major third, C to G perfect fifth, C to B flat, that's a minor seventh. So we've got a major triad plus a minor seventh. This is what we call a dominant seventh chord. And on the next measure, G to B, there's the major third, G to F, there's the minor seventh, dominant seventh chord. The next measure, D to F sharp, major third, D to C, minor seventh, dominant seventh chord. And then, of course, hanging out unresolved, the G to the B in the last half a measure there is the major third, and the G to the F is the minor seventh. Notice that those notes between the purple and the green voices, that minor seventh, that major third, forms a tritone. Either an augmented fourth if it's written as it is here, or at the end the F to the B is a diminished fifth. And those tritones are very powerful dissonances that want to resolve. Augmented fourths have to resolve outwards into sixths. Diminished fifths have to resolve inwards into thirds. And that's because of the half steps of the key. That's where you have Fa Mi happening and Ti Do happening. And we know that those are very powerful magnetic forces in music that those half steps want to resolve. So let's take a listen, and then let's take a little bit more look at the solfege involved in resolving these dominant seventh chords. Oh, do you hear how unresolved it sounds at the end? Yeah. I mean, you can hear that power of that dominant seventh chord wanting to resolve. All right, let's go to the whiteboard. So, the dominant seventh chord, like I said, it happens above. The reason we call it a dominant seventh chord is because generally speaking, unless you're playing like blues or something, which outside of the common practice, that dominant seventh chord only shows up in one place. It shows up above the Sol. It's the only place that we have that diminished fifth happening between Ti and Fa. Sol, Ti, Re, Fa. So let's put these in here. This is our dominant seventh chord. The Sol 7/5/3. And of course we like to use the T in minor as well. So I've got a T and I've got a Fa. Those are my more interesting things. I've got a Re. And of course it wants to resolve Do. Sol, Do. That 7/5/3 likes to resolve down by fifth or up by fourth to another 5/3. We're destabilizing a 5/3 chord, turning it into a dissonance by adding a 7 on top of it. And that's going to make it want to resolve like this. And so I've got my bossy zons in the bass, Sol, Do. My other voices, I know exactly how I want to resolve them. Ti, that's my canti zons. Ti goes to Do. Fa, that's my alti zons. Fa, Mi. Re, that's my tenori zons. It would be boring to go to two Mi's, so we're going to resolve Re, Do. Yeah. So there we go. Tenori zons, Re, Do. Alti zons, Fa, Mi. Canti zons, Ti, Do. And bossy zons, Sol, Do. And they just like to resolve like that. Now notice here, I have all of the notes of the dominant seventh chord here. Sol, Ti, Re, and Fa. But I don't have all of the notes of the Do 5/3. I don't have a Sol. I have 3 Dos and I have a Mi. So we've seen lots of cadences and in our studies with triple Do and a Mi. Nobody needs that fifth really. It's kind of optional. If I did want a fifth at the end, well, let's see what we can do. I'm still going to do sol do in the bass. I like that sound. I'm going to do my sol 753. I'm going to do a do 5-3. And for it to be a dominant seventh chord, it has to have that seventh. It has to have that major third. It has to have the T to the do, and it has to have that fa to that mi. The third and the seventh define the thing. We've got our bass note. That's harmony's all about the bass, but the third tells me whether it's a major or minor chord. It has to have that major third. That seventh tells me what type of seventh chord it is. And I know that's a dominant seventh and not a major seventh because I have this minor seventh here. So I need those. And then I need a sol here. What type of voice ends on it? Oh, the boring altizans ends on that sol. Sol, sol. There we go. So now I've got a full chord at the end. I've got my do, two do's. I've got my mi. I've got my sol. That's a full chord. Oh, but look what happened. In order to make that happen, I had to put in the other altizans. I don't actually have the fifth of the dominant seventh. And so in a four-voice texture, this is how you see dominant seventh chords resolving, is there will either not be a 5 above the sol, or there will not be a 5 above the do. And the easiest way to write dominant seventh chords and resolve dominant seventh chords is to remember your different zans voices. Sol do, the bossy zans. Re do are tenori zans. Fa mi are altizans. Ti do are cantizans. And these are the essential voices in the dominant seventh chord. You see that shows up in both versions. And then I either have the tenori zans or I have the boring altizans. Boring altizans, sol, sol. In a four-voice texture, I don't have both. If I wanted a five-voice texture, I could have complete chords in a five-voice texture. I would have the re do and the sol, sol both showing up. Now, of course, the other fun thing to do, we've seen cadences where we don't resolve sol do. We set it up so that you're expecting everything to resolve, but it doesn't resolve. And so I could do a deceptive cadence. Let's mess things up here. We don't want to clear the canvas. But I'm not going to resolve sol do. We're going to resolve sol la. There's my deceptive bass line. Instead of getting the sol do bossy zans, I get the sol la deceptive bass. Everything else is going to resolve exactly the way I'd expect it to. Re to do, ti to do. In a three-voice texture, we've been having both voices resolve to the do in a deceptive cadence forever. Why? Because sol to re is a fifth. If I went re mi, the inner voice tenori zans, sol to re would be a fifth, la to mi would be a fifth. That'd be parallel fifths. You don't want to do that. So we're just going to resolve to that doubled octave, re do, ti do. I now have my fa mi, my cantizans or altizans there, and then sol la gives me my deceptive resolution. Notice that I'm not going to do in a deceptive cadence. We're not going to do this boring altizans version, because what would I do with the sol? There would be nothing good to do with the sol. If I did sol sol, I wouldn't end on a la. Nice strong la 5-3. La to do is the third, of course. La to mi is the fifth. So sol la, if I did both voices going sol la, I would have parallel octaves. It just doesn't work. So we want to stick with our traditional tenorizans, cantizans, altizans, and the deceptive bass if we're writing a deceptive cadence. So that's how the sol 7-5-3 chord works. And either resolving to the do 5-3, two different ways, a complete first chord or a complete second chord, and the deceptive resolution of the sol 7-5-3. Of course, in minor it wouldn't be sol la, it would be sol, sol le, and instead of fa mi would be fa me, so in minor. But that's the dominant seventh chord. We'll look at invertible variations of this next Monday.